management. This video is unique in that it combines two of the competencies that you'll see or work with in the course. And the material is, of course, taken from the Bateman and Snell Text Management, Leading and Collaborating in a Competitive World, 11th edition by good old McGraw-Hill. The first slide we're going to talk about is the concept of strategic human resources management. What is HRM, as it's otherwise known? Well, human resource management is the formal systems for management of people within an organization. So obviously, an organization, as far as I'm aware, is a combination or a group of people working together. And from that, we have the idea of human capital. You've probably heard this phrase before. We have financial capital, we have capital goods, factory equipment, things like that, means of production, but we also have the concept of human capital, the knowledge, skills, and abilities of employees that have economic value. You've heard the phrase, you're only as good, or the organization, company is only as good as the people who work for it, and that's very much true, and that's what human resources management is about. Managing these skills, applying them to problems that the organization faces, and obviously if it's a for-profit, like most companies are, then how do we make better products or services, deal more effectively with customers, so that they continue to be our customers going forward. So this concept is very important. It's not just hiring and firing people and so forth. There's a lot of things involved. Some of the things we'll talk about in HR management are job analysis, job description, and specification, which I think most of you are familiar with. We have the job analysis, which is really a tool for determining, or a way of determining what is done in a given job, what should be done on that job. So if you have a new job, for example, coming up, a new position, HR would analyze, well, what are the key things that need to be done? And through that, you have the job description, which is the essential tasks, duties, and responsibilities involved in doing a particular job, and then job specification, skills, knowledge, and abilities that the person needs to perform the job, right? So description and specification are the things that we see most often, and when we apply for a job on the internet or in the newspaper or however else we get that information. Really a combination of description and specifications, right? The duties, responsibilities of the job, and pretty much what skills and so forth you'll need to accomplish those. Moving on to an overview of the HR process from figure 10.1. This is directly from chapter 10, of course. This course, if I haven't mentioned before, is not an over. It's basically an overview of the HR in diversity areas. It's not going to go into a lot of detail, so we're not going to cover all these things that are highlighted or listed here in this figure. But we'll talk about some of the things like planning, programming, evaluating, environmental scanning, human resources planning, kind of the basics. And then activities and results, okay? And you can take a look at those and further refer to them in the text directly. Before we go into some more details about those things, there's one thing I wanted to address, and that's the Hackman and Oldham, as it's mentioned in the book, model of job design, okay? Model of job design, figure 13.4. This is from chapter 13. It's actually in the new version of the course, the latest version of the course. It's I believe in the conflict and change management competency, but I just put it in here because I think it fits more with the HR area. It is important, so I just want to bring it up here in its own slide. So what this is really, and you probably read or will read more about Hertzberg and his two-factor theory about hygiene factors and motivators. Hygiene factors are things that are just kind of taken for granted on the job, that the pay, the benefits, let's say, and certain things, the reporting to your boss, and what you're going to be doing on the job. And those are like kind of, without them, people wouldn't be happy, but it's kind of taken for granted, right? Motivators are those kind of extra things that would motivate people, kind of those above and beyond that get people motivated and psyched and excited about their job and what they're doing. So anyway, the latter, as it says right here, providing a meeting on the job. And what Hackman and Oldman did is took a look at this, and they came up with this model of core job dimensions, critical psychological states, and translating into personal and work outcomes. If you take a look at this figure, it highlights everything pretty nicely. We have those job dimensions there on the left side: the skill variety, task identity, task significance. All those three things. Read about them in the text. You can kind of figure out just from looking at that variety of things, using different skills, identifying with something, a task on the job, and gaining significance from that, the meaningfulness of the job, and that's what it translates to, basically psychological state. Your feel that the job work is meaningful. You have autonomy, which here in the United States is highly important, right? We're individualistic, kind of independent type society. So you want to experience responsibilities for outcome of the work, be able to decide on what to do, have some decision making ability, and also you want feedback, knowledge of the results of the work activities, that you are actually doing something similar to the meaningfulness, that your input is actually making some results, right, whatever that may be, and that that is meaningful, that something good is becoming of your labor. Personal work outcomes, they're all listed there, and kind of combining all these, you have more motivation, internal motivation. Person wants to work harder, work better, more high quality work, performance, satisfaction, and translating to lower absenteeism and turnover. So people stay longer, they don't miss work that often. And basically the idea is that employee growth and strength of the workforce, right? So those are important things. That model of job design is important. Make sure you take a look at that. Go back to chapter 13 for some more info if needed. Selection process. We're coming back to that human resource, that selection process. So step back a minute here. I'm not sure if we discussed that directly, but the key function of human resources, besides all these things here with the selection process, is going back to that diagram we talked about 2 slides ago, or we looked at 2 slides ago. We have the kind of environmental scanning, just like strategic planning. When you come up with your plan, you're looking at the environment. How is the overall environment, that external environment, what are we looking like internally in the firm, our strengths and weaknesses, external opportunities and threats. And the same applies to HR. So we look at where we're headed as a company, our mission and vision, where we need to be, and HR is responsible for the people, right? The human resources, the human capital. So do we need to go out and find people with new, better skills and so forth to do, to get us where we want to be? And so sometimes the company has to look internally, sometimes or very often externally, to find folks, right? And so you have that matching of supply and demand, right? The key thing of that labor supply and demand. And sometimes there's a mismatch. We know many IT positions, computer highly skilled technical positions, are hard to come by, but there's a great demand. There's a great demand, and there's a mismatch, not enough qualified people to fill those jobs. So we go then to the selection process. Everybody's familiar with these. If you've worked anywhere or hired at least once in your life, you have obviously applications and the resumes, and that process. Everything is now online and changing very rapidly with social media and so forth. But you still have interviews, either face-to-face or through a video or telephone. You have reference checks, right? You have background checks, looking at the person's background. You have personality tests. You have drug tests, right? Still common, especially in certain types of roles where that's important. You have cognitive ability tests, right? Basically, your IQ tests, really. And you have performance tests. How well can the person do the job or perform, work on, let's say, a certain type of machinery, or driving, maybe, a big rig, Class C or Class A, I think it's Class A type license, for example. And then integrity tests, right? How the integrity, the kind of ethics of the person, and so forth. And so you have, and there's many others we can think about, but these are the key ones talked about in the course. So make sure you understand, well, this kind of mix is how the selection process works. From the initial, talked about, looking job analysis, coming up with the job description, the specifications, and then putting that out there so that people can apply and start that process of finding the next person to fill that role. The next slide, we're moving on to competitive advantage through diversity and inclusion. And we have 4 specific areas here that we want to point out as far as advantages to having diversity in the workplace. The first that we mention there is ability to attract and retain motivated employees, right? If you're being more inclusive and purposefully attracting folks from different backgrounds and recruiting them, then you hopefully will get motivated employees that just happen to be different in a certain way, but are very much looking forward to add value to your organization. You also get better perspective on differentiated markets, right? Very multicultural society, goes without saying. So you want people to understand that, right? Be part of those maybe subgroups or different groups in society. So the company through that will gain a better understanding on marketing to them, right? And selling and meeting the needs of those populations, those market segments, as they would be called. Next is ability to leverage creativity and innovation in problem solving. Again, you have different ways of thinking. People from diverse backgrounds, you're trying to mitigate that group think where everybody, like-minded people tend to think alike in many cases. So you're leveraging different ways of thinking, hopefully more creativity and more innovation to the problem solving. And we know that companies have a lot of problems to solve these days, right? Ongoing competition and technology changes and many other things that happen. And then just the idea of enhancement to flexibility in the workplace. Obviously, if you're more inclusive of people from different backgrounds and want them to be a part of your organization, you're going to be a little bit more flexible, and that will help the overall population of the human resources within the organization, right? You'll be more open, and you'll have people different backgrounds, ways of thinking, going back into those other areas we talked about, and that really provides more flexibility to the workforce, right? As opposed to just kind of one way of thinking and acting. So we'll move on to the flip side, to the challenges of diversity and inclusion, and we have 5 there. Take a quick look at those 5 and see if you can figure out what they mean. So these are listed in the textbook, mentioned in the textbook, and I do want you to go back and review those. But up top we have unexamined assumptions. Really what that is basically everybody has their own worldview based on your background, your experiences, your beliefs, values, and maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of other things that make up individual human beings. And you have assumptions that you just think, oh, this is how it is, and this is how those people are, and this is, these things are just common to the human experience, but you never don't really think about that. So you have these unexamined, as they call them, assumptions of how other people behave and act and so forth. And that leads to other things, to mistrust and tension, stereotyping, thinking, oh, everybody from this type of population does this or acts in a certain way, and that's not necessarily true, of course, right? That's the idea of stereotyping. Everybody from this population, is the same, kind of this blanket approach. So you tend to could have communication problems. Like-minded people tend to think alike, right? And you're attracted to people, or feel closer to people with similar backgrounds and languages, obviously, right? To communicate, if you speak different languages, you're going to have communication problems, different cultures and different perspectives. So these are all problems that can arise, in the mistrust and tension among people who are maybe not used to working with each other, and through that you'll have lower cohesiveness, group cohesiveness, where you don't have those things that kind of tie people together, those commonalities with a perhaps a very diverse workforce. So those are some of the challenges. Read up about them in the book as you move forward, and we will go on to very dense slide. I realize that, but just wanted to point that out. This is taken from chapter 10, and it's a summary of key labor laws. So luckily, you're not going to have to know them all, so please don't worry about memorizing every single one, but this is a good list. I wouldn't say comprehensive, but it's definitely has the key ones up until the early 90s and so forth. And we have everything from the Fair Labor Standards Act back from the late 30s, of the Great Depression, before World War II, and going on to the 60s. A lot of things happened in the 60s, of course. Equal Pay Act, the different civil rights acts, executive orders with relation to those, and federal contractors, and the big one, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is the one that prohibits discrimination on race, sex, color, religion, national origin, and so on and so forth. And then you move on down to age discrimination, which is I guess the ADEA or ADA, I forget now what acronym they use. I think it's ADA as well, but age discrimination in employment, late 60s. So people over 40 become what they call a protective class. And then there's the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, as far as addressing people with disabilities. And then physical and mental impairments, using the phraseology here directly from the text. And then the Americans with Disabilities Acts, that's another big one. The ADA from 1990, affirmative action for vocational rehabilitation. So strengthening those laws, and so for anti-discrimination statutes with people dealing with people with disabilities. The Civil Rights Act clarifies different things from Title VII, burden of proof to employer, and then FMLA, Family Medical and Leave Act, up to 12 weeks, about 3 months unpaid leave. So these are key things. The key thing, I think the key term you want to remember is EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity, right? Commission, right there, Equal Employment Opportunity Laws. That's really what they are in a general. You're not going to get too many specific questions. You want to just know that these are all equal employment opportunity laws. Okay, and I believe one of the last slides here is the guidelines for diversity training. Going back to chapter 11 now. Training, of course, and development are areas and key areas in human resources, and we're going to focus on them more specifically for the idea of diversity training. So what is training? Everybody's familiar with that term. It's basically teaching mostly lower level employees. I hate that phrase, that term lower level, but it's really teaching employees, really from any level, mostly used on the lower levels, how to perform their jobs, right? Kind of that addressing skills and or lack thereof, training them how to act in certain ways, whereas development is more for higher level, more of the managing level, manager level, professional staff to learn more broad skills, more of those soft skills for both the present and future jobs. Again, development into management, for example. So that's training and development, and the idea of, especially for diversity training, awareness building, you want to sensitize others to importance of valuing diversity, right, for the reasons we talked about before, and understanding those assumptions that they have, bringing those out in the open, assumptions and stereotypes they may have, and bring out the awareness that that's not necessarily true. And skill building, dealing effectively with diversity issues on the job, giving them the skills to deal with some of these issues that will arise, right? Lack of or difficulty in communication, stereotypes, things of that nature. And then we have a table 11.8, and has 6 different things on, or areas, on diversity training. What makes effective diversity training program, and so read through those. Everything from position training in the company's diversity strategy. Do make sure you do a needs analysis and distinguish between education and training. Okay, idea of building awareness and teaching usable skills. Right, education builds awareness, but doesn't necessarily give you skills to deal with the dealing with diversity issues. Okay, so how to address diversity issues that may arise. Use a participative design process. Bring in the different stakeholders, different employees and stakeholders involved. Test the training before you roll out to the general population, and incorporate diversity programs into core training, kind of onboarding when you have somebody starting with the organization. So kind of build it into whatever you do. Okay, so a lot of stuff we can talk about. Obviously, training. There's a whole books that you can read and write perhaps about different training and development areas. But suffice it to say that these are the important things that you should know for this competency. So with that, we're going to leave it at that, and hope you enjoyed the presentation. I want you to go back and maybe review this video a few times. Go back to the textbook and review that as well, and dig in a little deeper with some of the areas we talked about. And otherwise, wish you all the best in your studies going forward. Good luck. Take care.